After 15 years of excluding me from family reunions, they had the nerve to show up at my mansion. I opened the door, spoke calmly, watched the color drain from. For 15 long years, I was invisible to my own family. Invisible, ignored, cast aside like some unwanted burden. Every year, without fail, they'd gather for their grand family reunions. Big dinners, photo sessions, cousins laughing together, uncles toasting with wine glasses, the kind of moments that get plastered all over Facebook with captions like, "Family is everything." But me? I never received an invitation. Not even a text. Not a single call. At first I thought maybe it was a mistake. Families forget sometimes, right? The first year I asked my mom if there was going to be a reunion. She looked at me like I was ridiculous. "Oh, well, it's just a small gathering. Nothing big." But later, I saw the photos online. My parents smiling, my sister showing off her kids, even my distant cousins were there. Just not me. The second year, I convinced myself they'd remember. I baked a dessert, packed an overnight bag, waited by the phone. The call never came. And then I found out through a cousin's tagged photo. They had all been at the reunion again, drinking, eating, and laughing without me. My heart shattered that night. I cried myself to sleep, clutching my phone like it would magically buzz with an apology. By the third year, I stopped waiting. I stopped hoping. I realized it wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. My family had decided I didn't belong. I spent birthdays alone, Thanksgivings with whatever cheap frozen dinner I could pull out of the microwave, and Christmas mornings staring at the ceiling of my tiny apartment while everyone else was probably unwrapping gifts by the fireplace. It hurt. God, it hurt so much that I thought it would break me, but instead it shaped me. Their rejection carved a fire inside me, a fire so fierce it consumed every ounce of self-doubt they had planted. If they didn't want me at their table, I would build my own. And it wouldn't just be any table. It would be one they couldn't ignore. I started from the ground up. No inheritance, no handouts, no safety net. Just me, 2 part-time jobs, and an unshakable determination. While my parents poured all their love, pride, and money into my sister, the golden child, I scraped and clawed my way into building something of my own. I worked in cafes, bookstores, call centers, anywhere that would pay me enough to keep the lights on. Nights were spent in libraries devouring every book I could about finance, real estate, and entrepreneurship. I taught myself the rules of money because no one was going to teach me. By the time I was in my late 20s, I had saved enough to invest in a small business. It was a risk, but I put everything into it, and slowly, painfully, it grew. From one business came another and another. I learned to fail, and I learned to rise again. 10 years passed. Then 15. While my family was busy clinking glasses at reunions without me, I was building an empire brick by brick, and one day, I looked up and realized I wasn't that lonely, forgotten girl anymore. I was standing in the marble foyer of a sprawling mansion, one that overlooked acres of land I owned. My name was on deeds, on companies, on contracts worth millions. I had staff who greeted me with respect. I had friends who chose me, not because of blood, but because of loyalty and love. The irony was almost poetic. The very family who once declared through their silence that I wasn't good enough would one day drive up the long private road to my mansion, uninvited, desperate to be let back into my life. But that part of the story comes later. For now, let me tell you about the night everything shifted, the night I realized I had finally outgrown their shadows. It was a quiet evening in the mansion. I had just returned from a trip abroad where I signed a deal that would triple my company's value. My assistant handed me a glass of champagne, congratulating me. I sat on my velvet couch, staring at the city lights from the huge glass windows, and it hit me. I had made it. Completely, entirely, without them. And then, the phone rang. The name flashing on the screen made my stomach twist. It was my mother. For 15 years, silence. For 15 years, nothing but absence. And now suddenly, her name. I didn't answer at first. I let it ring. My assistant glanced at me, sensing the tension. "Do you want me to take it?" she asked. I shook my head. My hands trembled as I finally pressed accept. "Hello?" My voice was flat, guarded. "Sweetheart," she said, her tone dripping with false warmth, the kind of sweetness you put on only when you want something. "It's been so long. We've all been talking, and we thought it would be wonderful if we could come by, visit you. We'd love to see your new place." My heart pounded. I almost laughed. After 15 years of excluding me, now suddenly they wanted to see me. "Why now?" I asked, my voice sharp. She hesitated. "Well, it's just that the family's been through a lot. We thought it was time to mend things. You know, family is everything. Family is everything." The same words they plastered on their Facebook photos while I was left in the dark. I didn't give her an answer that night. I simply said I'd think about it and hung up. But I already knew. This wasn't about love. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about my mansion, my wealth, my success, and I decided right then and there, if they wanted to step into my world after casting me out for 15 years, they were going to face the consequences of their choices. They had no idea that I wasn't the same desperate, broken child they once ignored. I was someone else now. Someone they couldn't control, couldn't belittle, couldn't erase, and when they came knocking at my gates, I would be ready. The morning they showed up is still burned into my memory. It was a Sunday. The sun was barely peeking through the curtains, casting golden streaks across the marble floor. I was sitting on the balcony of my mansion with a cup of freshly brewed coffee, enjoying the quiet hum of nature, the birds singing, the fountain in the courtyard gurgling softly, the smell of jasmine drifting from the garden. It was peace. The kind of peace I had fought for, bled for, worked myself to the bone for, and then the gates buzzed. "Miss," my head of security said through the intercom, his voice firm but hesitant. "There's a group of people at the gate. They say they're your family." My chest tightened. I set the cup down slowly, my fingers trembling just slightly as I stood up. Through the security feed on the screen, I saw them. My parents, my sister, her husband, even a couple of cousins I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. They looked small, standing there against the towering iron gates of my estate, clutching handbags, shifting uncomfortably. For 15 years, they never once showed up for me. Not for birthdays, not for graduations, not for holidays. And now here they were, suddenly desperate to be let inside. I took a long breath, forcing calm into my voice. "Let them in," I told security. As the gates swung open, their eyes widened. They craned their necks to take in the manicured lawns, the expansive gardens, the sleek black cars parked in the driveway. I watched from the balcony as their expressions shifted, from curiosity to disbelief to something darker. Jealousy. When they reached the front steps, I was already waiting, dressed in a silk robe. Standing tall with my arms crossed, my mother was the first to speak. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with forced affection. She stepped forward as if she might hug me, but I held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. "Don't." My voice was calm but firm. "You don't get to call me that anymore." Her smile faltered, and the awkward silence that followed was heavy. My father cleared his throat. "Well, you've done well for yourself," he said, his eyes scanning the pillars, the crystal chandelier visible through the doorway. "Quite the place you've got here." I let the silence linger. I wanted them to squirm, to feel the weight of all the years I had been left behind while they celebrated without me. Finally, I spoke. 15 years, I said softly. 15 years of reunions, birthdays, weddings, and not one of you thought to include me. Not once. My sister rolled her eyes as if my words were some petty complaint. "Oh, come on. You've always been so dramatic." It wasn't personal. Things were just complicated. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Complicated? You erased me from the family. You made sure I knew I wasn't welcome. And now suddenly, when I have all this, I gestured to the mansion around me, you decide it's time to reconnect? Their faces tightened. No one spoke. I let them in, but not because I forgave them. I wanted them to see. I wanted them to walk through the house and choke on the life I built without them. As they stepped inside, my sister's jaw dropped. The marble floors gleamed under their feet. The grand staircase curved like something out of a movie. Art pieces lined the walls, originals I had collected from around the world. A chandelier glittered above them like captured stars. "Wow," my cousin whispered, eyes darting everywhere. My mother placed a hand on her chest, as though overwhelmed. "This is unbelievable." "Yes," I said flatly. "It is, and I did it without any of you." We moved into the sitting room. My staff brought refreshments, serving them with perfect politeness. My family, who once laughed at me for being the odd one out, now sat uncomfortably on my velvet couches, sipping drinks served by the employees of my household. Finally, my father spoke. "Listen," he said, leaning forward, clasping his hands together. "We know things weren't perfect in the past, but family is family. We thought maybe it's time to rebuild, to move forward together." I tilted my head. "Move forward? Now that I have something worth taking?" His face flushed. "That's not what this is." I stood up, pacing slowly across the room. "Do you remember the Christmas I spent alone in my freezing apartment while you were all together, singing carols and opening presents? Do you remember my college graduation? The one none of you bothered to show up for, even though I sent the invitations myself?" My voice cracked for a moment, but I pushed on. "Do you know what it feels like to look at a phone that never rings? To scroll through photos of your family celebrating, laughing, eating, and realize you weren't even thought of?" The silence was suffocating. Tears pricked my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "Not in front of them." "Not now," my sister shifted uncomfortably. "Look, maybe we made mistakes, but why hold on to the past? We're here now. Isn't that what matters?" I stopped pacing and looked directly at her. "You think showing up at my door erases 15 years of abandonment? You think it makes up for the nights I went hungry? The holidays I spent alone? The years I fought like hell to prove I was worth something?" Her face hardened. "You're still bitter. That's your problem. Maybe that's why you were left out in the first place." The words hit like a slap, but instead of crumbling, I smiled. A slow, sharp smile. "You know," I said, lowering my voice, "there's something freeing about realizing I don't need you. Not your approval, not your love, not your company. I built this life without you. And the truth is..." I leaned closer, my voice like ice. "I don't trust you." Their faces fell. My father's jaw tightened, my mother's eyes watered, and my sister clenched her fists. But I wasn't finished. "You want a reunion?" I said. "You want to come back into my life? Then you'll do it on my terms. Not as the family who abandoned me, but as the people who finally understand that you lost the right to control me." I watched their expressions shift. Anger, shame, discomfort. But beneath it all, I saw something else too. Desperation. They needed me now. Whether it was for money, status, or simply because my mansion proved I had become someone they could no longer ignore. They needed me, and I wasn't about to let them forget it. That night, as they left my home, I stood at the doorway watching them. My mother turned back once, as if expecting me to call after her, to soften, to beg for the family I had craved for so long, but I didn't. I let the silence speak for me. For 15 years, they erased me. Now it was my turn to decide whether they ever got to step back into my life again. That night, after they left my mansion, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the long hallways, the polished marble floors echoing with the sound of my own footsteps. The house was silent, eerily so. For years I had dreamt of this, peace, space, the life I carved with my own hands. But now, after their sudden reappearance, the silence felt different. Heavy. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the window overlooking the garden. My mind raced. Why now? Why, after 15 years of ignoring me, of excluding me, of mocking me behind my back? Why were they suddenly so eager to sit in my living room and smile fake smiles? The answer was simple. Money? Status? What else? I thought back to those years. Nights when I cried myself to sleep. Mornings when I forced myself to go to work with an empty stomach. Holidays I spent staring at photos of their happy faces without me. All those scars still burned. And now, they had the nerve to pretend like none of it happened? No, not this time. I made my decision that night. The next weekend, I called them. Yes, I said coldly, when my mother answered. Come over. We'll have dinner. I could hear the excitement in her voice, though she tried to mask it. Of course, sweetheart. We'll be there. I smiled bitterly. Sweetheart. That word had been absent from her mouth for 15 years. When they arrived, the dining room was already set. A long mahogany table, candles flickering, plates polished, crystal glasses shimmering in the light of the chandelier. The smell of roasted lamb and garlic butter filled the air, courtesy of my personal chef. They looked impressed again, but this time I noticed something else. A hunger, not for the food, though they eagerly eyed the plates, but for everything around them. The life, the luxury, the power. As they took their seats, I raised my glass. To family, I said, my voice steady. They awkwardly repeated, to family, we ate. We drank. For a while there was small talk, fake laughter, my sister's forced compliments about the decor, my father's half-hearted questions about my work. But I knew what they were waiting for. The moment to ask, and they didn't disappoint. My father leaned forward first. You've done incredibly well, he said, his eyes locking onto mine. But, times are hard for us. The business hasn't been the same. We thought maybe you could help. There it was. The truth. I set my glass down slowly. Help, I repeated. My sister jumped in quickly. It's not just money. It's about reconnecting. Being there for each other again. But yes, a little support could go a long way. I laughed softly. Not a happy laugh, but one filled with years of bitterness. Support? I said. Do you mean the way you supported me when I was struggling to pay rent? When I was eating instant noodles for weeks because I couldn't afford groceries? When I cried myself to sleep because my so-called family decided I wasn't worth their time? Their faces tightened. You excluded me from everything, I continued, my voice rising now, trembling with controlled rage. 15 years of reunions, birthdays, holidays? I begged for love, for attention, for a seat at the table. And every time you made it clear I wasn't wanted, the silence was unbearable. My mother shifted uncomfortably. We didn't mean stop. I cut her off sharply. Don't insult me with excuses. You meant it. Every cruel word, every cold shoulder, every invitation you never sent. You meant it. Tears pricked her eyes, but I felt nothing. I stood up, towering over them. And now, suddenly, when I have something worth taking, you come crawling back? You don't want me. You want what I've built. My sister slammed her fork down. You think you're better than us now, don't you? I leaned closer, my voice like ice. No, I know I am. Because I made it here without you. Because while you laughed at me, I was building an empire. While you excluded me, I was grinding every single day. And while you were busy pretending I didn't exist, I was becoming someone you can't ignore. The table went dead silent. The only sound was the crackle of the candles. Then I delivered the final blow. You want my help? You want my money? My support? Fine. Here are my terms. You will acknowledge what you did to me. You will admit, right here and now, that you abandoned me, that you erased me, that you only came back because you need me. And maybe, just maybe, I'll consider helping you. Their faces drained of color. My father's pride wouldn't let him speak. My sister's jaw tightened in anger. But my mother broke first. Her voice shook as she whispered, We were wrong. We should have been there for you. We should have loved you better. I stared at her for a long moment. My chest tightened, a lump forming in my throat. Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted to forgive, to let go. But then I remembered 15 years of silence. 15 years of pain. 15 years of being nothing to them. No, I said softly, shaking my head. It's too late. I snapped my fingers and the staff entered the room. Show them out, I ordered. They looked shocked, but I didn't waver. My father glared at me, my sister cursed under her breath, and my mother's eyes filled with tears as they were escorted toward the door. At the threshold, My sister turned back, her face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this," she spat. I stepped forward, my voice calm, steady, final. "No. I regret wasting 15 years of my life waiting for a family that never wanted me. But now, I'm free." The door shut behind them with a heavy thud, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't known was possible. Peace. They no longer had power over me. I wasn't the forgotten child, the unwanted sibling, the outcast. I was the one who rose, who survived, who conquered. And that night, as I stood in the quiet of my mansion, I realized something. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes family is the one you build for yourself, and I had finally built mine.